Welcome to the Real Texas Radio Podcast. I am Bronin, your host. Thank you for tuning in once again to the Real Texas Radio Podcast, or if you are joining the show for the first time, 1,000 welcomes. I've got a big show today. I'm going to be moving all around the state of Texas. I'm going to be talking about Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick, what is going on with Ken Paxton, and the latest data out of the betting markets in the race against James Talafrico. I'm also going to be talking about what's going on in our state legislature, a bit of a conflict of interest, it appears, with Paul Battencourt, top Republican in the Texas Senate. And I am also going to be covering what's going on with Karmelo Anthony, who was convicted of murdering Austin Metcalf earlier this year, sentenced to prison for 35 years. He's back in the news, back in court last week. And I draw some parallels to another national case, or a case of national interest. Lindsay Clancy, the registered nurse, mom of three, accused of killing all of her children. I don't even think she's denying that at all. But you should hear the strange defense that she is trying to persuade juries to believe in order to acquit her. All right, but before we dive in, make sure you follow the Real Texas Radio Podcast on X at RTR_Bronin, RTR_Bronin. And also, if you haven't given the show a like, a follow, subscribe to the Real Texas Radio Podcast, download those episodes from wherever you stream, please make sure you go ahead and do that. Thank you very much. All right, let's go ahead and get into it. All right, now, you're listening to the Real Texas Radio Podcast. I'm your host, Bronin, just a fed-up taxpayer bringing you all of your Texas, local, and national news. Okay, first, I want to talk about Dan Patrick. He is the Lieutenant Governor of Texas. He is seeking re-election. He's in his 70s. And, you know, as somebody who comes from Massachusetts, I understand things could be 1,000% worse than Dan Patrick. So before I start complaining about him, I'm just going to point that out. I blanked him in the primary. Am I going to vote for him on November 3rd in the general election? Yes, I probably am. I'm probably going to hold my nose and vote for Dan Patrick for Lieutenant Governor. So just so you know where I stand before I start my rant here. This is Dan Patrick. This is in the last few days. It looks like he's holding a press conference. And now he is on the banned books crusade, or the pornographic or the sexual books that are in schools on library shelves. This is Dan Patrick.
These are books that are so disgusting, so filthy, so dirty, so vulgar, so pornographic that for the ladies here, I wouldn't even open it and show you. I wouldn't show my wife. I didn't show the female senators last session. I had the books to hand out. We passed the bill, but I did it without, if someone wanted to take the book for themselves, and I'm going to give you a copy, everyone here. You can decide not to look at it, or you can. And if you're offended, understand these books are on our library shelves. Many books are on our library shelves.
So if you go to Dan Patrick's X feed, he's got a podcast, by the way. He has a podcast now. I think Ted Cruz has a podcast now. You know, I don't think I really like that our statewide politicians who are drawing a salary and they're basically getting free exposure as statewide politicians or national figures. I don't think I really appreciate that while they're in office, they have a podcast. Now, I know they can do it. Obviously, they can do it. I'm just saying, I think it's going beyond the scope of making comments at a press conference or making a speech from the chambers or writing an editorial to publish in a newspaper, or even having a Substack or your own social media feed where you can tweet your opinions. I don't know why, and I'm not fearing the competition, okay? This is a small, independent, volunteer operation I'm running here. But if you go to Dan Patrick's X feed, his whole feed is just promoting his podcast. Much of it, he's got videos, and he's with, I don't know if it's a parent or it's some activist, an older woman who's going around the country. And this was a trend years ago. It started several years ago. It's all part of the trans conversation, that all of these sexualized books are on the school shelves in elementary schools, in the libraries. And parents around the country, they're showing up to school board meetings, and they bring one of the books that's in the school library, and they start reading the book. And then next thing you know, the Democrat trustees, they have them thrown out of the meeting for reading from the book that they found on their child's or their grandchild's school library. And so this is not new. So I don't know why Dan Patrick is picking this up 3 months out from the election or so, a little bit over 3 months. And this is the issue that he wants to get out to the forefront of the public's attention: books. Now we know something that I talk about often as a former public school teacher in Texas. I taught high school. Kids don't read. They do not read. For the 98% of them or more, they're not reading books. Okay, if you want to hide something from a child, go stick it in a book and put it on the library shelf. Okay, that's the equivalent of sticking it in a locked steel fireproof safe. So they're not reading. So I don't think this is a big rush. I'm not saying these books should be in the school library. That's not what I'm saying. But I'm just pointing it out. If we line up, if we make a list of all of the problems confronting Texas, are books, are they in your top 5? Are they in your top 20? Just wondering. Okay, but this is now Dan Patrick's issue. Just like a couple of years ago, he decided that weed gummies, and marijuana is illegal in Texas and always has been, but hemp, THC, okay, I don't know so much about it, but we have vendors, we have retail stores throughout the state, and they're selling what is basically weed. Okay, it's basically weed in all forms, in edible form, in liquid form, in smokable, combustible form. It's in all the forms. So Dan Patrick made it his issue that he wanted all of it banned. All of it banned. This is after, talk about the worms being out of the can. And he lost. Governor Greg Abbott vetoed that bill that would have decimated the hemp industry, which, it's my understanding, like it or not, employs tens of thousands of people in this state. And you know what? I just read a stat now that the preferred vice among alcohol, cigarettes, and weed now nationally, it's weed. So the cat is out of the bag. And, you know, I don't smoke weed myself. It's not my thing. It's not for me. I certainly don't love when I'm trying to cross the street and as cars are speeding by me, the stench of marijuana is emanating from vehicles. I don't love that. I don't like driving while stoned. Not a fan of that. But you know what? I'm not going to join them, but I can't beat them. So you just have to accept it. And of course, the regulations, they change constantly. Even the legislature is not even in session. And several times over the last year, even though Greg Abbott vetoed the ban on hemp last year, the year before, Dan Patrick, he's still working to get it banned. And he's just like this cantankerous, long in the tooth, old grumpy guy now. And, you know, now he's going to be going into the legislative session as lieutenant governor. He presides over the state senate here in Texas. And he's boasting about Operation Double Nickel. Double Nickel. Dan Patrick. Double nickel. What the hell is that, Dan? Another homestead exemption that's a shell game that if you're a normal working person isn't going to help you at all. That's what double nickel is. It's more shell game. It's fake property tax relief. It's non-property tax relief. Dan, why don't you work on some real property tax relief instead of books, instead of weed gummies? I think we'd appreciate that as Texans, Dan. Thanks a lot. And you know what? I don't like seeing you in that leather jacket and in the Steve Jobs black sweater. You're not cool. Okay, you know what? You look like you're trying to be James Dean or something. Don't wear that anymore. All right, that's enough of Dan Patrick. Let's move on. All right, let's move on. We got to talk about Ken Paxton, the Attorney General, who is seeking the U.S. Senate seat to replace John Cornyn, who he just defeated in the runoff a few months ago. Ken Paxton, you may have seen the Poly Market or Kalshi, one of those online betting markets, now has James Tallarico leading Ken Paxton. I don't know the exact figures, but it's been getting a lot of traction the last few days on X. And, I saw somebody, one of the conservative accounts, one of the big ones, retweeted, well, how typical of the Democrats. They always show these polls that have the Republican losing. Beto O'Rourke, for example, was supposed to beat Ted Cruz, and then Colin Allred, he was going to beat Ted Cruz as well. That didn't work out too hot. Well, here's the thing. Poly Market and Kalshi, they're not polls. They're not fake Democrat polls at all. And people typically, they vote, or pardon me, they're voting with money, essentially, right? So they're betting money on who they think is going to win. And ultimately, I think a lot of people, whether they care or not, they want to win the bet, right? They want to increase their investment. And of course, I know things can change. Next week it could change. In a month's time it could change. But this is what really worries me about Ken Paxton. He's not doing well at all with reporters, with critics. He doesn't respond well to any type of questions. And I guess just a few nights ago, he attended the Wings game, which I think was at the American Airlines Center. He attended with his daughter, and this is one of the cuts that surfaced from Ken Paxton.
We're here to support women's sports. I'm here with my daughter. We're going to have a great night.
Yeah, that's about it. That's the big statement. That's the big viral moment from Ken Paxton. And anytime he's asked about, for example, how did you develop this multi-million-dollar, multi-state luxury property portfolio while you were the Attorney General of Texas, making a salary of under $200,000, maybe somewhere like $150,000 a year, with your wife, who is a state senator, who's making less than $10,000 a year in that role? How did you develop this real estate portfolio worth millions of dollars and increase your net worth so vastly? And then his apologists and his defenders will say, well, he was a private attorney in private practice before he became Attorney General. Okay, but the wealth didn't seem to accumulate until he became the Attorney General. I mean, he's been in elected politics now for how long? He's been the Attorney General for what, 10, 12 years almost, something like that? So he won't answer any questions about that. He won't answer any questions about, well, why are you still voting in Collin County if you've been living in Denton County for the last year plus because you're separated from your wife? Are you living in Denton County? We're not sure. I mean, he's got multiple houses in Texas, so I don't know. He doesn't want to talk about that. And these are legitimate questions you're allowed to ask if you're a reporter. Okay, look, I voted for Ken Paxton in the runoff. I told you that. I'm going to vote for him in the general election. But I'm just saying that we have a candidate here. We already knew about his baggage and flaws. Hey, Donald Trump has a lot of baggage and flaws too. Affairs, some financial mysteries, allegations of financial shenanigans, sexual assault allegations, right? And you know what? Trump comes out swinging. And Ken Paxton, he's a shrinking violet, it appears, whenever he is confronted with any tough questions from the media. And you know what? I think he is relying on surrogates, and he's relying on influencers to just keep recycling all of the deeply disturbing, bizarre, and difficult to explain viral moments from his opponent, James Tallarico, who is just an abundant and prolific, weird, he's got all these weird statements about trans, about racial relations, about religion and Christianity. So he really should be a gift candidate to anybody, to an opponent who's in any way deft with handling the media. There's no debate scheduled either. There's not a single debate. Shouldn't we be having a debate in September if the election is in November? Ed Markey debated Seth Moulton in Massachusetts. 80-year-old pathetic Ed Markey, whose last real job outside of elected politics was driving an ice cream truck. I am not making that up. Ed Markey has already got on television and agreed to a televised debate, which was pathetic and sad. Two woke white dudes who just screaming at each other, who supports trans rights more and who hates Donald Trump more, and who believes in anthropomorphic hoax climate change more and windmills more. That's what the debate was. Every bad, crazy, stupid idea out of Sodom and Gomorrah, whoever supported it more was the winner in that debate, I guess. And Ken Paxton, who's supposed to be this big, tough, biggest Trump GOP attorney general in the United States, a lawsuit filing machine, suing all these blue cities all the time, just suing all the woke out of these blue Texas cities, and he can't answer for himself. He can't answer for himself to the press. He won't answer any questions. He didn't come up with a strategy. So I guess, again, he's just relying on the influencers and the surrogates and the fact that Texas is a red state. And you know what? I hope he can pull it off. I hope he can pull it off. But guess what? Being a U.S. senator, I would say that's more of a fake job than being an attorney general of the state. And basically, if you're a senator, all you're doing is just talking, like, for a living, right? Isn't that what you do? You're just talking most of the time behind the scenes. But after being a third-term incumbent, statewide elected office, he should be able to handle a debate with an opponent. Ted Cruz, again, he didn't shy away from debates. Again, against somebody like Colin Allred, who he debated right before the 2024 election. That was, you only needed kid gloves for a lightweight like Colin Allred. But I don't get it. I really don't get it, and I don't like it. And you know what? I think even if you're a staunch Paxton supporter, I think you still want to see a debate between Tallarico and Paxton, don't you? Let's talk about another person who I'm not really pleased with here in the state of Texas. That's Paul Battencourt. He is the majority leader of the Texas Senate. He's been a Texas state senator, I think, for over 10 years. Prior to that, he was the tax assessor collector for Harris County, which is Houston is Harris County, for those of you if you live outside of Texas. And I think he's a lifelong Harris County resident. He owns a private business, right? So this is Texas. This is free America. And we're supposed to be, if you're a Republican, you're supposed to be fighting to maintain a low tax environment. And yes, I understand that it is the local taxing authorities, the city council, the school board, the county commissioners who are setting and collecting the property taxes in the state. But the state politicians, the state legislature, they're supposed to be getting the situation under control, providing real relief. So, Paul Batencourt, during the COVID hoax farce nonsense scam, do you guess what he received? You're not going to believe this. You're not going to believe what Paul Batencourt, what he got into during the COVID hoax farce nonsense scam. That's right, a PPP loan. He got a PPP loan. You know what? Batencourt Tax Advisors, LLC, formed in 2009. That's the year that he finished becoming the tax assessor collector in Harris County, then moved into the state legislature. He received $623,500 forgiven PPP loans in 2020. Revenue up to $10 million a year. I'm not sure if that refers to how much his firm is bringing in. Now, I was alerted to this by a Twitter or X account, the Texan, spelled TEXXAN. He's a good Twitter account. I think he's been shadow banned. He's very aggressive about ending property taxes, and which I appreciate anybody who's doing that. We all have to beat the drum constantly. And so he is very critical of a lot of Republican politicians as well. So he tweeted this out about Paul Batencourt. You know what is just as disturbing, perhaps, as rich people and deeply connected people securing PPP loans, ultimately getting them forgiven, is the fact that Paul Batencourt, so his Batencourt Tax Advisors, LLC, the private business that he operates, so he's a tax advisor, right? He knows all about taxes. Obviously, he was the assessor collector in Harris County for many years. So, do you know what one of the services that his firm offers to clients? He will, or his firm, his colleagues, his subordinates, they will help you navigate your property protest hearing. They will advise you how to fight your county in Texas to get your property to be appraised lower than what the county says it should be appraised for. And obviously the goal of doing that is to cut your property tax burden. When Paul Batencourt, aren't you supposed to be working to cut the property taxes for everybody anyway? Isn't this a bit of a conflict of interest that you make money on people because of property taxes? That partly fuels your business. I would say that's a bit of a conflict of interest from my point of view. Isn't that kind of like when the Dallas Morning News, which advises its readers to pass every single Dallas ISD bond coming down the pike, 100% pass the bond, which by doing that, you increase property taxes on yourself? Dallas ISD, the Dallas Morning News, they typically endorse all bond elections. And then they turn around, they partnered with one of these property tax advisors, not Batencourt's, but they partnered with a private company that was advertising helping you protest your property tax appraisal. They got into business with a company like that. The Dallas Morning News advocates for higher property taxes all the time, and then they partner with a company and make money off a firm that says they will cut your property taxes. How backwards is this? How insane is all of this? All right, here's the last subject I want to talk about. There are two big cases that have, I would say, captured the nation's attention for those people who like to watch trials and cases. And one of them is in Massachusetts, Lindsay Clancy. And I'm going to just tell you right now, I have not watched the trial. And I've heard bits and pieces. I've heard commentary. And it appears that there's a huge group of supporters for Lindsay Clancy. If you're not familiar with the trial, a few years ago, I think in 2023, she strangled all of her children who were babies with exercise bands, those stretchy bands. I think while the husband was out running an errand, something like that. She's a registered nurse. She was, and I think she was in the labor and delivery unit. That's the kind of nurse she was. And she has pled not guilty by reason of insanity after she killed her 3 children, or I think 2 of them died at the house, and I think one of them survived for a few days afterward, but eventually died. She slashed her wrists, superficial wounds, and then she jumped out the window and paralyzed herself from the waist down. So she has been appearing at trial, which I think has been going on for the last 3 weeks. She's wheeled in her wheelchair, and I think she's hysterical, crying for most of the testimony, like showing the autopsy photos of her children. And again, her defense is not guilty by reason of insanity, and she was prescribed all of these medications, and she's saying that, she pushed back on the medication, or, she's putting the blame on other people, her defense. Of course. I mean, she's up for life in prison. So I guess you'd say anything to avoid life in prison, wouldn't you? I think the woman is about 35 years old. And so these supporters, it's all white women. They're in the pink shirts. And she's got almost $1 million in a GoFundMe. It's well over $800,000 have poured into her GoFundMe. And she's got supporters lined in the street outside of the courthouse. And I believe this is in Plymouth County, which would be one of the, I don't know if it's the most conservative county in Massachusetts of the 10 counties, Plymouth. But it's more red-leaning, I would say, considering Massachusetts. And, it's just ridiculous to me. And it seems like there's a good chance this woman could be freed. I believe the jury is largely female, and I would assume white, Plymouth County, Massachusetts. And she's got a huge base of support for all these women who identify with postpartum depression, and the husband sucks, or he's hands off, he's checked out of the relationship. She killed all of these children. The problem is the jury slip. The district attorney has charged Lindsay Clancy with, I think, 2 counts of murder, 2 counts of strangulation, aggravated something. It looks like she's being charged with murder 1, though. An element of murder 1 being premeditation. And I think that's the piece that's in dispute, or that's the element in dispute. Was it premeditated? Had she been planning this for some time, or was it just a bout of psychosis overtook her? And then it was either, murder 2, which I don't think is on the jury slip, or manslaughter, not on the jury slip. So the jury is going to be confronted with this situation. Either convict her of murder 1, or there are lesser charges as well, or deadlock, retrial. I don't know how it's going to go. I've heard that the prosecutor hasn't been doing a great job, but again, she did it. And you know what? I'm gonna pose a question here before I move over to the Texas case. Karmelo Anthony is back in the news. But if this woman, Lindsay Clancy, if she was black, you think she'd be getting all this benefit of the doubt, postpartum depression, sympathy? Do you think? Oh, her husband. People are blaming the husband now, who did not kill the children, but because of how he treated the wife, or didn't treat the wife. I guess he's remarried now to somebody else, so that means he's guilty too. In these supporters, so I dare say a lot of these women showing up, obviously they have no problem with abortion up to the minute, but she killed 3 babies. And, I think even Candace Owens weighed in. I didn't even see what her comment was. I have no problem if you want to find some culpability with the doctor over prescribing, but even so, this woman, she's a registered nurse. She should be very aware of postpartum and very aware of medications, psychotropic medication, I would say.
This woman obviously had lost her damn mind. She needs psychotropic medication.
It sounds like she got a little too much psychotropic medication. But, it's not like this is the 1950s and you're some housewife with no access to the internet and these drugs are just coming online and the doctor says, oh, why don't you take some happy pills? And you don't know what you're getting yourself into. This woman, she had medical education and she worked in a hospital, and she should have had awareness, in my opinion, that, maybe you're not supposed to be taking all of these drugs. Or maybe you need to take a break in between certain psychotropic medication. Wouldn't you say? Isn't it just easy to blame the doctor? And maybe, like I said, maybe there is some blame for the doctor, but...
The mentally insane, we have a lot of mentally insane killers. I mean, you can't even talk to them. It'd be nice if you could have a little reason, but you can't even reason. These are seriously ill people.
Yeah, that's what it looks like to me. So, and... Anyway, so we'll see what happens. Maybe she'll get off. Maybe the jury will deadlock. But let's bring it home to Texas here. So in Collin County, Karmelo Anthony, you may be aware, it was a big trial. I think that the trial was in April or May earlier this year. And Karmelo Anthony was convicted of murder, sentenced to 35 years. The trial was actually brief. And he stabbed another teenager. I think both boys are 17 years old. A black teenager stabbed a white teenager, Austin Metcalf, in the heart, stabbed him in the heart on school property at a track meet, and he was convicted. And it turned into a total a racial circus. It was all about race, and this is racism, and Karmelo Anthony didn't get a fair trial, and the jury was all white. No, the jury was not all white. There were, I believe, Asians and Hispanics on the jury. Why weren't there any black jurors? There certainly were black jurors who were summoned to the jury pool who could have participated in the trial, but it's my understanding all of the potential black jurors put their hands up and said, I'm not going to put him in jail. I can't do that. I'm not going to be responsible for that decision. I'm not going to have that decision on my conscience for the rest of my life. So all of the potential black jurors, they dismissed themselves. They could have gotten on the jury, and they could have gone in there and deadlocked and gotten him a new trial or delayed. They could have if they wanted. I know you're supposed to be impartial. You're not supposed to do that. That would be fraud, right? That's illegal. But I'm just saying, Collin County has a black population, by the way, of about 12%. So that means that, roughly slightly more than 1 in 10 potential jurors summoned are going to be black. And, in a very high profile case, you might have to move above the strike zone of, I think, like 35 or 40 if your jury number is under 40, I believe, roughly. You have a much higher likelihood of being impaneled on the jury. So now at issue after the conviction is I'm not even sure why this is being entertained, why there would possibly be a new trial. Apparently, statements that the judge made, Judge Roach, I believe is his name, he's recused from the hearings that went on last week where Karmelo Anthony's attorney testified, strangely. So Judge Roach is recused, and apparently after the trial he went on television and made some statements which Judge Roach is now being accused of prejudicing, I believe, or improperly handling the trial and his duties as judge as a result of this. So Karmelo Anthony, he was another person with a GoFundMe. I don't think he netted quite as much as Lindsay Clancy did in Massachusetts, but hundreds of thousands of dollars, it's my understanding, maybe $500,000. So he should have been able to buy a solid defense for that money. And in addition to all the professional excuse makers who love to get involved in high profile trials and elevate their own status. So it has come out now that both sides, the prosecutor and the defense, in pretrial, they had a gentleman's agreement where they decided that they were not going to release certain details about these boys' histories, about text messages that they sent, statements that they made, all the trouble that they were getting into in school, suspension, for example, any kind of violent tendencies or aggressive tendencies. And you know what? 2 examples here. You've got 17-year-old Austin Metcalf, white kid. You've got 17-year-old, at the time of the event, 17-year-old Karmelo Anthony, black. And both of these boys were aggressive, okay? Because it has nothing to do with race. It has all to do with sex and age. Young males, 15 to 25, out of their minds, out of control. Brains have not developed. And any of the messages that I saw, and a lot of them have been released, I'm going to go ahead. I've actually got a tweet here. I'm going to go ahead and just read some of the details. There was a great reporter who was in the courtroom, and there's another reporter too, Sarah Field. She was reporting on the original trial, and she seemed to know about this, about all these text messages. So this is something that she released, Sarah Fields. Update: Bill Wersyke, I think he was the prosecutor in the case, revealed in court that Karmelo Anthony had previously been taken by his parents to a special program at LSU for kids who can't keep their hands to themselves, right? Yikes. Kids who can't keep their hands to themselves. Here's some other information. J.D. Miles, this reporter, I believe, was physically present in court last week. And the whole purpose of these hearings is possibly to retry Karmelo Anthony, give him a new trial. A lot of people have asked why Karmelo Anthony took a knife to a track meet. Those reasons were captured in our 404 motion. The morning of the stabbing, his ex-girlfriend, Karmelo Anthony's ex-girlfriend, goes to an assistant principal saying she broke up with Karmelo and he was stalking her. Anthony text message, there are some typos in this tweet. This is a quote. Anthony text message saying, "I'm low key on the verge," morning before stabbing, and emphasized it. He also threatened her, the girlfriend or the ex-girlfriend, with a knife in one message and told her in another, "When I stab somebody, I'm going to lick their blood off the blade." Okay, so the prosecutor agreed to suppress these kinds of details because Austin Metcalf, he had a bit of a history too with making some unsavory comments. Here's some of the background report. Again, this is J.D. Miles. On Austin Metcalf that's being discussed in court during his hearing over a motion for a new trial. It's more than 20 pages, but here are notable incidents. Austin Metcalf and his brother Hunter, twins, were once caught spray painting graffiti including KKK, Kill All Blacks, and Heil Hitler, along with the N-word, and were sentenced to 12 months of juvenile probation. Records reveal they reportedly told authorities, quote, "We did some dumb stuff," and quote, "We did some vandalism." There are several documented instances of Austin using racial slurs in school, and in 2023, Austin was accused of bullying a black student in class. In 2018, while still in elementary school, Austin and his brother were accused of bullying and assaulting a female, which led to his arrest. During an argument in 2024 with another female student, Austin allegedly knocked her to the ground and punched her in the stomach. Okay, this is the victim, deceased, stabbed in the heart by Karmelo Anthony, who definitely was given the angelic treatment, portrayal in court. hey, I am not saying at all that in any way this excuses being murdered. I'm not suggesting that whatsoever. But just telling you, this is why both sides, the prosecutor and the defense, agreed to just suppress the histories of these two young people. Austin was also kicked out of a football game and texted someone later, "I was about to beat the blank out of those kids," expletive. At a previous track meet, when another student alerted Austin that someone not on their team, quote, "behind our bench was talking wild," Austin reportedly replied, quote, "kill that MF." Okay, which was basically the situation, the circumstances leading to his murder. Karmelo Anthony was allegedly, he was under the tent of another school. Apparently, you know how high school is. It's very territorial and very, okay, I don't care. During the 2023-24 school year, Austin received in-school suspension twice. School disciplinary records from April 2022 to May 2024 reveal that he reportedly called a teacher the B word or used profanity. He told a school official that, quote, he couldn't control it and wasn't aware that it was coming out of his mouth. As a public school teacher for 7 years in Mississippi and Texas, I can tell you absolutely none of that is stunning. And any public school teacher, especially in the urban districts, and this is in the burbs, Collin County, right? This is where all the good kids are with the families, right? It goes on everywhere. It's not surprising. In 2024, on at least 5 occasions, Austin saw a counselor regarding his anger and rage during a football game. In 2021, he got banned from attending basketball games for a season after yelling profanity at a player. Metcalf also got suspended after he and another student were talking about bringing a gun to school the following day. Okay, doesn't change the fact that Karmelo Anthony brought a knife to the track meet. And there's even more stuff about Karmelo Anthony. There's a lot more. And I think he was also, let me see if I can find it here. I've got so many tweets. I retweeted all of this stuff out, by the way. RTR_Bronin, RTR_Bronin. And while you're following me on X, make sure that you are subscribed to the Real Texas Radio podcast. Download those episodes. Stream them anytime. We got a big back catalog. I did cover the trial, a little bit of Karmelo Anthony earlier this year, if you want to go back and listen to some of those details. All right, I found it. Here's Sarah Fields again. So later that morning, she's describing the court filing information that about Karmelo Anthony. Later that morning on April 2nd, 2025, only hours before Karmelo Anthony stabbed Austin Metcalf to death at a high school track meet, prosecutors state Karmelo Anthony's girlfriend told a Sentinel high school staff member he was engaging in stalking behavior, to include but not limited to driving by her home and refusing to allow her to end the relationship. Prosecutors also note that Karmelo Anthony had earlier been accused of taking his girlfriend's phone. In October 2024, drafted a to-do list instructing her how to handle, quote, weirdos, which included the line, quote, say something slick like my BF kill people. Text exchanges further reveal that he admitted on at least 2 occasions to punching girls on the face. Oh, that's something that Austin and Karmelo have in common. Some more personality traits and behaviors they have in common. Punching women. Prosecutors located 2021 messages between Karmelo Anthony and another student discussing robbing someone for $300. Other texts show Karmelo Anthony recounting a fight and punching someone so hard he had to stop fighting. 2023 prosecutors say Karmelo Anthony told a friend he planned to vandalize a house in Austin, Texas, writing, quote, I just feel like it. I got a grudge. This is why we don't let 17-year-olds vote, by the way, especially males with out-of-control brains that haven't fully formed yet. This is why when you're 17, you're not supposed to smoke weed or drink either, because your brain is still developing and you're highly prone to aggression. In 2021, Karmelo Anthony informed a friend he'd been suspended for 3 days after fighting, adding, "They said next time I do something, I get recommended for expulsion," court papers show. In a 2023 text exchange with a friend, prosecutors have messages in which Karmelo Anthony wrote, quote, "I'm going to shoot the school up tomorrow with my blick," but later followed up with, "I would never actually do that." In a 2024 thread, prosecutors state Karmelo Anthony admitted to carrying a firearm, telling a friend before a party he would have the gun in my pocket. Okay, you get the idea? You want a little bit more? After multiple suspensions for fighting while in school in Louisiana, messages between Karmelo Anthony and his girlfriend surfaced after he moved to Frisco. In one exchange, she suggests he simply sit for a while. He said, "Yeah, and punch people, maybe run sometimes. I have to, it's like a priority for me. I like punching people. When get mad, I see red. When I get mad, I black out. When I get mad, I can't control myself." Okay. Prosecutors also showed messages in which Karmelo Anthony admitted to getting high and drinking alcohol and even discussed selling drugs to obtain guns. In also 2024, messages recovered by prosecutors suggest Karmelo Anthony attempted to take a weapon into the State Fair of Texas, asking a friend if the State Fair got metal detectors. The State Fair does have metal detectors, and it is illegal to bring a firearm into the State Fair, by the way, right here in Dallas, Texas. When told that detectors were in place, the friend replied, "You got the poker? Yeah, I might have to toss it. I don't even know what that means." Okay. So Karmelo Anthony, I believe one of the defenses that his lawyer, who was terrible and got a very bad deal and result for his client, the lawyer, I believe, tried to convince the jury that Karmelo Anthony, he was a shrinking violet. Am I using that phrase twice in the same episode? He was afraid of Austin Metcalf because Austin Metcalf was one of those big corn-fed white boys. And Karmelo Anthony, slim figure. I don't know his height. But it certainly in terms of weight, I believe Austin Metcalf, and I think who might have been 6 feet, certainly outsized Karmelo Anthony. But it doesn't really seem that Karmelo Anthony, or he talks a lot of trash, talks a lot of noise, talks a big game. I know that, the loudest one in the room is the weakest one in the room, but not getting the vibe that Karmelo Anthony is very intimidated, not easily intimidated. So you can see why both sides were interested in suppressing that information from the jury, prejudicial to both clients. So they figured, let's just cancel it out. Well, guess what? Now it's public. So if there is a new trial, all this is coming out. And again, this all speaks to Karmelo Anthony's pattern of behavior, state of mind, attitude, right? We got a lot clearer picture now of Karmelo Anthony with this information released. So I don't know what's going to happen, if there's going to be a retrial or not. It doesn't sound like Karmelo Anthony is having a great time in prison. It does sound like, however, he's caught the attention of the fellow inmates. I think they have a gleam in their eye when they see 18-year-old Karmelo Anthony coming in the door. All right. I'm Bronin. Thank you for tuning in once again to the Real Texas Radio Podcast. Keep tuning in. Keep following. I will catch you on the next episode.